Have you ever met someone who, without raising their voice, shifts the entire atmosphere of a room? They don't argue, they don't plead, they just remove themselves, quietly, completely, and that silence says more than 1,000 words ever could. People feel it. They sense the difference. They start wondering, reaching, panicking. Everything shifts. Now imagine you did the same. Instead of reacting to every little thing, you stayed still. Instead of fighting to be understood, you simply withdrew. What would happen if you didn't rush to explain yourself? If you didn't jump to soothe discomfort? If you chose calm over chaos? That's where your true power starts to surface. Because here's a difficult truth. Most of the world has gotten used to having access to your energy. They know your buttons. They rely on your reactions. You've been trained, maybe not directly, but deeply, to be emotionally open, physically present, psychologically available, at all times. But the moment you begin to step back, everything starts to unravel. Not for you, but for them. See, the game changes when you stop showing up on cue, when you stop dancing to the rhythm someone else sets. That's when the mask falls, and suddenly, all those people who claimed to know you, they're left facing the fact that they never actually did. They only knew the version of you that was always giving, always showing up, always explaining. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Think about that. Think about how people react when you go silent. Who starts trying to provoke you? Who suddenly becomes critical, clingy, confrontational? That says less about you and more about them. It reveals just how much your identity, your predictability, your emotional labor has been taken for granted. And what's more painful is realizing how much of yourself you've handed over just to keep the peace. Every time you said yes when you wanted to scream no. Every time you responded to that late-night message, even though you were exhausted. Every time you justified your feelings to someone who never tried to understand them in the first place. You gave away a bit of your spirit. And what's left after all that giving? Fatigue, irritation, a strange hollowness you can't quite explain. That's the cost of always being reachable. You're too emotionally available for people who haven't even earned your silence. That's the real betrayal, not what others do to you, but what you do to yourself in trying to keep everyone else comfortable. But this isn't about shutting the world out. This is about coming home to yourself. It's about something Jung called individuation, the process of becoming your truest, most complete self. And that journey starts when you stop performing and start preserving. When you realize that stillness isn't weakness, that choosing not to respond isn't giving up, it's taking back control. So I'm going to ask you now, really ask you, how long will you let other people's emotions run your life? How much longer will you allow others to dictate your responses, control your tone, direct your energy? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Every time someone pokes a wound and you react the same way, that's not communication. That's programming. It's time to cut the wires, to stop being predictable, to become enigmatic. You were probably raised to be accommodating, trained to reply quickly, to smile politely, to say yes, because that was what was expected. From childhood, you've been taught that your value lies in your availability, that being there for others all the time is the sign of a good person. But that's not kindness. That's a trap. Being excessively available isn't a badge of honor. It's a form of self-erasure. And the more you believe that your worth depends on how much you give, the more you'll be drained, dismissed, and discarded. Because predictability, no matter how well-intentioned, eventually turns you into a utility. Something to be used, not respected. That's why some people only reach out when they're bored, when they need reassurance, when they want someone to dump their emotions on. They don't want you. They want what you offer. And as long as you keep delivering without boundaries, you become their personal emotional vending machine. Push the right button, get what they want. No cost, no effort. And you might not even notice it, because it feels normal. It feels like this is who I am. I help, I support, I show up. But at what cost? Your peace, your energy, your sanity. Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to function in society, to be accepted, to belong. And the most dangerous thing about this mask is how natural it starts to feel. You become the version of yourself that everyone loves. But it's not real. It's polished, palatable, predictable. And that's what keeps you too available. You respond to texts instantly, even though you're exhausted. You smile while you're bleeding internally. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. You defend yourself to people who've already made up their minds. You play a role, because that role feels safer than being misunderstood. But all the while, you vanish from your own life. And that's the heartbreak we don't talk about. The slow vanishing of self. When you center everyone else so much that you start forgetting who you are. Being constantly available is not just tiring. It's a subtle form of self-rejection. You're outsourcing your value to other people's approval. And every time you do, you pay with your peace. Let me be brutally honest with you. People who demand your constant availability don't want you. They want what you give them: emotional validation, a listening ear, a distraction from their own pain. And the minute you stop being useful, you become invisible. You see, true respect doesn't come from being endlessly present. It comes from being discerning, from knowing when to speak and when to be silent, from choosing not to show up for what drains you. Because here's the cruel paradox. The more accessible you are, the less valuable you become. It's a law of emotional economics. What's too easy to access becomes cheap. Nobody treasures what's always on tap. They only begin to miss you when your absence teaches them what your presence really meant. So ask yourself, who truly deserves your time? Who's earned your attention, your loyalty, your emotional labor? But more importantly, who deserves your absence? That's the question that begins the great unraveling. That's the question that brings you back to yourself. But before you answer, you need to look deeper. Ask, why do you always say yes? Why do you always reply? Why do you feel the need to fix, to explain, to justify? That urge, that automatic impulse to react, isn't random. It's rooted in your inner psychology. It's tied to what Carl Jung called psychic energy. And that's where we're going next. Because your energy isn't infinite. And if you don't learn how to guard it, to direct it consciously, others will continue to siphon it for their own comfort. Your energy is your essence. It's your life force. And every impulsive reaction, every defensive explanation, every emotional outburst, every forced conversation is a leak. And no one teaches you this. No one warns you that being endlessly responsive isn't a virtue. It's a vulnerability. But once you see it, once you feel it in your bones, you can't unsee it. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming conscious. This isn't emotional shutdown. This is strategic silence. This is choosing to be present on your own terms. And the moment you make that choice, everything begins to change. Carl Jung didn't see the human mind as some robotic machine that simply reacts to things. He saw it as a living, breathing energy system. And like any system, it has limits. Every thought, every emotion, every choice costs something. So the real question is, where is your energy going? Are you directing it with intention? Or are you leaking it to people and problems that don't deserve a drop of it? Every time you react without reflection, you spend energy. Every time you argue a point that didn't need defending, explain yourself to someone who doesn't listen, chase someone who's walking away, you're bleeding energy, little by little. And then we wonder why we feel exhausted, anxious, numb. It's not because we're broken. It's because we're misaligned. Because we haven't learned how to conserve our most sacred resource, our inner power. Jung once said, "That which we resist persists." The more you react, the more you become entangled. You think you're breaking free, but really, you're tightening the knot. Emotional exhaustion isn't weakness, it's misplaced devotion. It's the result of constantly trying to pour into empty cups that don't pour back. And over time, that kind of living makes you vulnerable. Not just tired, but open to manipulation, to being used, to being seen as someone who can be pushed, prodded, and pulled in any direction. There are people who can sense this, the opportunists, the emotionally starved, the ones who don't know how to generate their own energy, so they feed off yours. And if you're always reacting, always fixing, explaining, showing up, you're the perfect source. But Jung said, a healthy psyche knows how to hold on to its energy. It doesn't give itself away without purpose. It knows when to speak and when to fall silent. It knows that sometimes the strongest move isn't defense, it's disengagement. Ask yourself, how many nights have you stayed awake, obsessing over something someone said, replaying conversations, imagining different outcomes, wondering why someone treated you the way they did? That's not healing. That's hemorrhaging. That's your energy being siphoned by situations that no longer exist, except in your mind. And while you're stuck in that loop, the world keeps moving. The people who drained you, they're sleeping fine. They're on to the next person, the next distraction, the next source of validation. You're the only one still carrying that weight. So, what do? You start by observing, not reacting. What triggers you? What conversations make you spiral? What words make your pulse race, your chest tighten? Those are your energetic leaks, and that's where you begin the work. Not by fixing others, but by reclaiming your own stability. Because this isn't about becoming emotionally cold. This is about becoming emotionally sovereign. Being selective with your energy is not selfish. It's sacred. And when you learn to conserve it, something profound happens. You break free from the projections people have put on you. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't really see you. They see what they want to see. They see what they've projected onto you. A caregiver, a fixer, a safety net, a scapegoat. And the more emotionally accessible you are, the easier it is for them to keep using you to avoid looking at themselves. But when you stop playing the role, when you stop responding, stop explaining, stop performing, everything changes. The game ends, the masks fall, and people don't like that. Your unavailability threatens them. Not because you've done something wrong, but because now they're forced to face their own emptiness. Your silence becomes a mirror, and what they see in that mirror can be terrifying. Because it's no longer filled with your validation, it reflects their own internal noise. And this is where things get messy. They might lash out, accuse you of changing, of being distant, cold, selfish. Not because you are, but because you're no longer convenient. You're no longer serving the role they wrote for you in their script. But here's the thing. They were never in love with you. They were in love with the version of you that kept them comfortable. And now, that version is gone. Jung said we don't become whole by chasing light, but by confronting the dark, by making the unconscious conscious. And when you withdraw from toxic dynamics, when you stop feeding dysfunction with your energy, that darkness rises, in others and in you. But are you ready for that? Because choosing peace will often mean walking away from people who only knew you through your pain. It means tolerating the silence, sitting with discomfort, being misunderstood. It means not explaining yourself when everything in you wants to scream your truth. And that's not easy. That's spiritual war. But here's what most people will never tell you. On the other side of that war is a kind of freedom that can't be explained. It's not loud, it's not flashy, it's not a parade, it's quiet, deep, solid. It's the kind of peace that doesn't need validation, the kind that doesn't chase anyone. It simply is. And silence. Silence is the gatekeeper of that peace. Not the silence of avoidance, not the kind that suppresses truth, but the conscious, focused silence that sees everything, but chooses not to dance with chaos. The kind of silence that is presence, not absence. Strength, not weakness. Sovereignty, not surrender. When you stop reacting, you start noticing patterns, cycles, the way some people always show up when they need something, the way drama seems to find you when you're trying to grow, the way certain conversations leave you feeling hollow, even when you smiled your way through them. All of that becomes visible in silence. And when you see it clearly, you can stop participating. Some people panic when you don't reply, when you don't explain, when you don't defend. It's not because they care. It's because they lost control of your emotional script. They don't know what comes next, and that shakes them. Because when you're silent, they can't manipulate your words. When you're silent, they can't twist the story. When you're silent, you win. Because silence isn't empty. It's full of answers. It's full of awareness. It's where you meet yourself. And yes, there will be a cost. Silence will isolate you. People who only loved the noise you made will drift away. People who thrived on your reactions will fall silent themselves. And it might feel like loss, but what you're losing was never really yours. What's being stripped away is everything that kept you from your power. Because the people who leave when you stop giving them constant access were never aligned with your spirit. They were only aligned with your availability. And now that you've changed, they can't find you. You're no longer where they left you, on standby. But here's the truth. The loneliness that follows your withdrawal isn't punishment. It's purification. It's where your real life begins. It's where you learn to be whole without applause, to be full without being filled by others. It's where clarity takes root, where self-respect blooms. And slowly, something extraordinary begins to unfold. You stop needing to be understood. You stop craving validation. You stop seeking rescue. Because now, you are enough for yourself. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation. The sacred, sometimes painful process of becoming who you really are. Not who others wanted, not who the world applauded, but you, unmasked, untouched, whole. And once you arrive at that place, something magical happens. You become unshakable, not because you're perfect, but because you're grounded. You no longer respond to chaos with chaos. You don't lower your frequency just to stay connected. You don't break yourself into pieces so others can feel whole. You simply hold your space. And in doing so, you become powerful in a way that no one can quite explain. You become unforgettable. You become rare. And the world has no choice but to adjust to your frequency or fall away. So the next time someone calls you cold or distant or says you've changed, remember this. They're only naming what they can no longer control. Your peace, your silence, your refusal to be predictable. You owe no one your energy, not your constant replies, not your instant availability, not your soul in exchange for shallow connection. Guard your energy like it's sacred, because it is. And if you've come this far, it means you're already walking the path of self-liberation. Don't stop. Keep walking. through the silence, through the discomfort, through the loneliness. Because on the other side is something rare, yourself. And that is the beginning of everything.